Boker Tov is Daf Yomi is Nazir Daf Mem Dawah Nazir 44. We're going to start on Mem Gimel Amud Beis around 6 lines from the bottom. The Gemara has put out the position that Rav says that a Kohen can only become Tameh, can only come in contact with the dead body of his father or his relatives when the father or the relatives when their body is intact. But when their body is chaser, when their body is missing parts, then you can't come in contact with it. So Gemara challenges this from a brisa there of Kahana cites. Vatanya. Rav Kahana cites a brisa. Rav Kahana taught the Rebbe Elazar ben Yaakov. Rav Kahana taught a brisa from Rebbe Elazar ben Yaakov where it says in the pasuk, it says in the pasuk, for her he can become tamei. So what is this pasuk mean? Says the brisa, he's not allowed to come in contact with her limbs. Pratla kazayis minames kazayis netzel muo tarvad rekev. He's not allowed to come in contact with just her limbs. If it was an outsized portion of part of her body, or a piece of the flesh, or a ladle full of the pulverized bones, he can't come in contact with it. He's not allowed to come in contact with just those limbs. Let's say you have the majority of her body there. I might think that the Kohen cannot come in contact with it if it's the majority of her. If it's her skull, it's her spine, if it's the majority of her skeleton, or if it's the majority of her bones, I might think the Kohen cannot come in contact with it. It states, it says you shall say to them, and then it says to them, the Amarta, there's another tumah, meaning to say that you're allowed to come in contact. Even though the Kohen cannot come in contact with one limb from his sister, he can come in contact with the majority of her bones or something that the life is dependent upon. Or on top of Mem Dauram and Aleph, I might think, okay, for his sister, he could come in contact with the majority of her body if she's dead, but not for another one of the 7 relatives. But no, just like his sister is somebody who he's connected to, and he's allowed to come in contact with her body, even though it's not intact, but as long as it's something that was so essential. So anybody who he's one of these 7 relatives, he's allowed to come in contact even though their body is not intact. So we see from here that this is a contradiction to the statement of Rav, because Rav said if the body is not complete, you can't come in contact. And here we say you can come in contact with an incomplete body. So this is a contradiction to Rav. This brisa contradicts with Rav. So the Gemara says, no, this brisa, even though it's cited by Rebbe Elazar and Yaakov, it is actually consistent with the position of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, who says that you can become tamei for a body that's not intact. And Rav is consistent with the following position. So Rav, we don't need to say that Rav is by himself arguing with that Tana, because Rav is relying upon actually the majority of the Tanaim. Because we learned the following: Ma'aseh Shemeis Aviv Rabbi Yitzchak Beginzak. Rabbi Yitzchak's father died in Ginzak. So he died in Ginzak, and then after 3 years, he found out about it. How did it take so long to know? We don't know. We don't know the full story here of Shas, Rabbi Yeshua ben Elisha. And they asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Elisha, the Arbas Zakanim She'imo, and they asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Elisha and the 4 elders who were with him, that they asked him whether or not Rabbi Yitzchak, who was a Kohen, whether or not he was allowed to go and come in contact with his father and to rebury him. And he said, no, to his father only when he's intact. And here it's a pulverized after 3 years, it's just the record. It's just the earth around his body. It's decomposed. It's not intact. So therefore, we're going to say that since the skeleton is not intact, you're not allowed to come in contact with it. So we see that Rav is consistent with this position. I am not sure who the 4 elders who are with Rabbi Shua ben Elisha are. This is not a frequently cited source in the Talmud. Rabbi Shua ben Elisha and the 4 elders who are with him. Maybe somebody can do some research and find out where else they're cited, but I'm drawing a blank. So now up to the next Mishnah. Shlosha minin asurin benazir. There are 3 types of things that are prohibited for a Nazirite. Hatuma v'teglachas v'yotzim and agef. And a Nazirite is not allowed to cut tuma. He's not allowed to come in contact with the dead body. Teglachas. He's not allowed to cut his hair. V'yotzim and agef. And he's not allowed to eat anything that comes from a grapevine. Chomer b'tuma b'teglachas min b'yotzim and agef. And the dead body and the haircut are stricter. Tuma and the haircut are stricter than something that it comes from the grapevine. Shatuma v'teglachas sotrin, because tuma and the haircut are soser. That means that you have to reduce the count. With tuma, you start over. With teglachas, you have to do a minimum of 30 days. You have to do another 30 days. You have to make sure that there's 30 days there before you count it. Now, yotzim and agef and eno soser. If you drink wine, you don't lose any of your days. Chomer b'yotzim and agef and mi b'tuma b'teglachas. The grapevine is stricter than tuma and the haircut. Yotzim and agef, and because with the grapevine, it's never permitted. But tuma and the haircut are sometimes permitted. When? B'teglachas mitzvah, when you're cutting your hair as part of the Mitzora's purification process, he's supposed to cut his hair on the 7th day. U'b'meis mitzvah, and also the tuma is permitted when it's a mitzvah, when it's an unattended dead body. Then you're required the Nazir is required to attend to that dead body. And tuma is stricter than a haircut. Tuma knocks out the entire count. You have to start over. You have to bring what's called the carbon tuma, which is an ola, chatas, and an asha. And Tegachas knocks out only 30 days, means say you have to complete 30 days before you cut your hair. You don't bring a carbon for it. So the Gemara says, the Gemara is going to cite now 9 different Kavachomers about the relationship between Tuma, haircut, and Yotzim and Geffen in the grapevine. Tuma, so the Gemara first says, Tuma Tutar Mikala. We should never allow Tuma, there should never be a point where Tuma is allowed, even by a Mace Mitzvah, Kavachomer Miyayin. Learn out from a Kavachomer argument from wine. Mayayin Shino So just like wine, which is not, doesn't mess up your count at all. It's never going to be allowed still. Tuma which knocks out your count, for sure it should never be allowed. No, the verse states, for his father and his mother, he's not allowed to become tamei. Which means for his father and his mother, he can't become tamei. But he can't come in contact with a dead body. So it's a verse. That's one. Number 2, v'yayin yutar mikol. Wine should be allowed for a specific reason, i.e. for a mitzvah. Kavachomer mituma, learn out from tuma. Ma tuma, shiso seres, putra mikol. Just like tuma, which does mess up your count, there are certain points where it's allowed, i.e. for a mace mitzvah. Yayin sheno soser, wine which doesn't mess up your count. Eno din sheyutar mikol. For sure it should be allowed sometimes. No, it says in the pasuk to tell us even wine that's a mitzvah is prohibited, like wine that's a rishus, like discretionary wine. It says the Gemara, 3rd kavachomer, yayin yistor sakol. Wine should mess up your count completely. Kavachomer mituma, just like from tuma, ma tuma. Just like which for mace mitzvah is permitted and it messes up everything. Wine which is never allowed, for sure it should mess up your count. The verse states about Tuma that the earlier days should fall away because his Nazirus became Tameh, which means Tumah Soseris V'Eina Yain Soser. Tumah messed up your count, but not wine. Number 4, Vatiglachas Tistoris Akol. The haircut should mess up your count entirely. Kavachomer Mituma. Learn it from Tumah. Ma Tumah Shlo Asuba Matame Kimitame. Just like Tumah, the one who makes you Tameh does not in violation of a prohibition, but the one who does become Tameh is, and still we say so Saras Sakol messes up everything. Tiglachas, but by a haircut, Asuba Megalech Kimitgalech. The haircut, the one who cuts the hair is in violation of prohibition, just like the one whose hair is cut. Din she is for sure she'll lose everything. Which means Tumas Oseris Sakol, the Intigachas is Oseris Sakol. No, the verse is telling us that only Tumah and not a haircut. Number 5, the Tumah Naasa Bamatame Kmitame. By Tumah, we should say that the one who cuts your hair should become Tameh, should be in violation, just like the one who gets his hair cut. Excuse me. The Tumah Naasa Bamatame Kmitame. The Tumah that we should say, the one who forces you to touch a dead body, is like the one who touched the dead body. And learn it out from a haircut. Just like a haircut only messes up your count by 30 days. And also by Megalech, I would say the one who cut your hair is equivalent to the one whose hair was cut, and with respect to the prohibition. Tumah shiso seris sakol, Tumah which knocks out your count completely. For sure, it should make the one who makes you come in contact with their body is like the one who came in contact. Makra says the verse, Vitime Rosh Nizro. The verse states, no, Vitime Rosh Nizro, Mitame Rosh Nizro. That means to say that where is this prohibition? Only by the person who cuts the hair, not the one who makes you Tameh. Number 6, V'tiglachas lo nasa b'megaleach kimit galeach. So the Gemara says, well, let's just say by a haircut, the one who cuts your hair should not be the equivalent of the one whose hair is cut. Kal v'chomer mituma. Why don't we learn out from Tumah? Ma Tumah she says, Saras is a call. It's like Tumah, which messes up your count completely. Lo asaba metame kimit tameh. And we don't say that the one who makes you Tameh is like the one who became Tameh. Tiglachas, a haircut. She'eno soseres el shloshim yom, a haircut where you only get messed up for 30 days. Lo kol shekain. For sure, we should say shalonasa megaleach kamit galeach. For sure, we should say that the one who cuts your hair is not the equivalent of the one whose hair is cut. So the Gemara says, no. It says a razor cannot go on his head. Karibe lo yavor. Who karibe lo yavor who lo yavor acher. Meaning to say he can't cut his hair and nobody else can cut his hair. And so that's the 6th kavachomer. A haircut should never be permitted, even for mitzorah. Kavachomer miyayin, we learn that from wine. Ma yayin sheino so ser, just like wine, which doesn't mess up your count, and lo huter miklolo, and it's never allowed. The glachas so seres, a haircut which does mess up your count, ain't din shelo tuter miklolo. For sure, it should also never be allowed. Am Rachmana rosh show. Am Rachmana zikano. So how do we know that a haircut, when mitzorah cuts his hair? Because of the extra word zikano. Number 8, tiglachas lo tistor. A haircut shouldn't mess up your count at all. We're not from wine. Just like wine, which is never allowed, and it doesn't mess up your count at all. A haircut which is sometimes allowed, i.e. for mitzorah, for sure it should never mess up your count. Mar says, well, you're right. It doesn't technically mess up your count. It's just that ba'inon gidol say or v'haleka. It's just that we require your hair to grow, and in this case, your hair is not growing. So that's the issue. Okay, number 9, v'yayin yistor shloshim yom. Let wine mess up your count for 30 days. Yayin yistor shloshim yom. Let the wine mess up your count for 30 days. If you drink wine, let it mess up your count for 30 days. Kavachomer mitiklachas. Why don't we learn that from a haircut? Just like a haircut. Which is permitted for a mitzvah, but for a mitzorah, so seres, it messes up your account. Wine, which is not permitted for a mitzvah, for sure it should mess up your account. The Gemara says, no, what's the whole reason why the hair messes up your count? It's not that the hair messes up your count. It's mishum gidol seir by it's because we require your hair to grow. But by wine, the hair is already grown, so you can't learn a kal v'chomer that wine should mess up your count. So those are the 9 kal v'chomers Gemara attempts. So now we're going to turn to a new topic on the top of 44b. The Mishnah tells us the gachas tuma. How do we go through the ritual of cutting one's hair if a Nazir became tamei, he touched the dead body before he completed his Nazirah? So then he has to wait 7 days. On day 3 and day 7, he purifies himself, and then he has to cut his hair, and he immerses in the mikvah, and then he cuts his hair, and he brings these 3 karbanos. So the Gemara is going to tell us how that process operates. The haircut after he came in contact with the dead body, Kate said, what does he do? He sprinkles the ashes of the red heifer on day 3 and day 7. And then he cuts his hair on day 7. Maybe karbanos b'shmini, and he brings the oah, the chatas, and the asham on the 8th day. Let's say he only cut his hair on day 8. He didn't cut on day 7. Then maybe karbanos of bobayon. Then he brings the karban also on the same day. So if he sprinkles on day 7, he goes to mikvah on day 7. He only cuts his hair on day 8. He could still bring the karbanos on day 8. That's the position of Rabbi Akiva. Says Rabbi Tarfon, Rabbi Tarfon, Mitzorah is also supposed to cut his hair on day 7. But if we say to the Mitzorah, if the Mitzorah only cut his hair on day 8, he doesn't bring the karbanos on day 8. He has to wait till day 9. So why do you make a distinction between this and the Mitzorah? So the Gemara says, Amalei, that Rabbi Akiva responds to Rabbi Tarfon, Zet harasa tuya b'yamav, Mitzorah to harasa tuya b'tigilachto. By the Nazir, the tahora process is not really about his cutting of the hair. It's about him waiting for the days. That's the essential point. And so therefore, once he reaches day 8, he can bring his karbanos as long as he cut his hair. Whereas by Mitzorah, his tahara, his purification process is really the removal of the hair. And so once the removal of the hair happens, he needs to wait till nightfall before bringing the karbanos on day 9. If he had delayed the haircut till day 8. So the Eno maybe karban elam kenayam mu'urav shemesh. He can only bring the karban if he waited for the sun to set. That's how he could bring the offering. So the Gemara says, Kibble minei, did Rabbi Tarfon accept this explanation from Rabbi Akiva that the Mitzorah, after you cut your hair, you need harav shemesh, you need the sun to set, unlike the Nazir. So Tashma, the Tani Hillel. The Hillel in this case is not the famous Hillel of the Tana, but this is Hillel the Amora. It's much later. So he says, Gileach b'shmini, maybe karbanos of b'shi. He says, if you cut your hair on day 8, you bring your karbanos on day 9. And this is talking about a Nazir, that the Nazir cuts hair on day 8, brings his karban on day 9. So that's what, and that's not like Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva said you could bring it on day 8. And if you say that Rabbi Akiva really accepted this answer from him, then he would have Rabbi Tarfon accepted from Rabbi Akiva, then the Brisa would have said he could bring it on day 8. So Amarava, well, Kasha. So Rava says it's not difficult. No, if he immersed on day 7, then you could bring the karban on day 8. That's what Rabbi Akiva was saying. But this price, which says you have to wait till 9, is because you only immerse in the mikvah on day 8, and you need harav shemesh until you can bring it on day 9. So now the Gemara is going to discuss about the purification of a zav. So we know that a zav is somebody who has some a tumah yotze menaguf, a man who has a flow from his body, and then he has to wait as part of his purification process. He has to be purified. So let's say, so if you see one tumah coming out of your body, the man sees one excretion coming out of his body, then he's just called a balkari, and he's tummy for 1 day, and then he goes to the mikvah and he's purified. But let's say he sees 2 within this period of time, then we're going to say that he needs to count 7 days, and on the 7th day he immerses in mayim chayim, a spring water, but he's not obligated to bring the karban. But let's say he saw it 3 times excuse me, let's say he saw it 3 times, then he's not going to be allowed. Then if he saw it 3 times, then he also has to bring this korban, which are two birds, Shnei Torim or Shnei B'nei Yonah. Then he has to bring those korbanos on day 8 after he goes to the mikvah on day 7, and he waits till the sunset, and then it becomes purified. Now, when the zav is tamei, he's not allowed to go into the Machane Leviyah. There are 3 camps. There's the Machane Shechina, Machane Leviyah, Machane Yisrael. The Machane Shechina is where the Aron Kodesh is. The Machane Leviyah is around the Aron Kodesh, where the Levites were allowed to go, around the Mishkan. And then there's the Machane Yisrael, which is where the Jewish people were. This corresponds to Jerusalem, which is Machane Yisrael, the Temple Mount, which is Machane Leviyah, and the Azara and the Beis Hamikdash, which is Machane Shechina. So when the Zav has the tomb of the Zav on him, he's not allowed to go into the Machane Leviyah. And that's the law of Tameim. So the Mitzorah is somebody who's sent out of all the camps, and the Zav is sent out of the Machane Leviyah, and the Tamei Meis is only sent out of the Machane Shechina. So after the Zav is purified, and he has not brought his korban, then he's allowed to go into the Machane Leviyah, but he cannot go into the Machane Shechina until he brings his korban. Okay. One more thing to bear in mind: the Machane Leviyah includes the whole. It is the Temple Mount and the Ezra's Nashim. That's called. And between the Ezra's Nashim and the courtyard of the temple, there was an entrance whose gate is called the Shar Nikanor, and that's on the threshold between the Machane Shechina and the Machane Leviyah. So the Zav can go into the Zav when he has 3 re'iyos. When he brings his korban, since he can't enter into the Azara, he stands at the Shar Nikanor until his korban is brought. So now the argument I'm going to discuss is Zav who immersed in the mikvah, but he didn't yet have Harav Shemesh. Can he go into the Machane Leviyah? So Amar Abaye, and the reason why the Gemara is discussing this is because it relates to the topic of our Mishnah. So Amar Abaye, Ashkechinu Lechavre de Rav Nassim bar Oshaya, the Yasun Kamer. Abaye says we found the Chevra of Rav Nassim bar Oshaya that they were sitting and they said, it says in the pasuk with relation to Ezav, Uval of Hashem al Pesach al Moed unesanam el Kohen, that the pasuk says about Ezav that after he counts the 7 days and he immerses in the mikvah, and on the 8th day he takes the 2 birds and he comes to Hashem, before Hashem, to the entrance to the tent, and he gives it to the Kohen. So Ema Sayuba, when can he come to the entrance to the tent and give the karbanos to the Kohen? Bismanshu Taval va'asar of Shemesh, when he immersed in the mikvah and he has the sun set, that's when he's allowed to come to the Machane Leviyah and bring it to the Kohen to bring his karbanos. That's Bismanshu Taval va'asar of Shemesh in. But if the sun has not set after he's immersed in the mikvah, he's not going to be allowed to come even into the Machane Leviyah. So we see from here, Alma Tful Yom Shal Zav Kezav Dami. So we see from here that the Zav who's immersed in the mikvah but has not yet had a Harav Shemesh, he's like a Zav, and he's not allowed to go into the Machane Leviyah until it's actually the sun is set. So that's what the Chavra said to Abaye. So Abaye responds, I said to them, El Me'ata, if that's the case, Gabe Nazir Tame, and Nazir became Tame from a mace, and he needs to bring his karbanos Nami. But also we can make this following drasha. The Siv, it states, El Kohen, El Pesach Ol Moed. The Nazir brings these 2 birds to the Kohen, to the Pesach Ol Moed. And you might have said that the same thing by the Nazir. When can he come? When can this Nazir who's Tamei come into the Machane Leviyah? Bizman shetavo va'as Erev Shemesh. Only after Tefillah and Erev Shemesh. But it can't be. Because why? But that's not possible that the Nazir can come to bring his karbanos because the Nazir has to stand at the Shar Nikanor. And where is this gate of the Nikanor that stands at the threshold to the entrance into the temple? Where is it standing? B'Shari Leviyah. This threshold is at the Shar at the Machane Leviyah, and V'lo Tamei Meis Bovad. Excuse me, Vatanya. We weren't in the Brayso. So Tame Mace Mutter we coming from Machanel Avia. The Tame Mace, in this case, the Nazir, the Nazir was Tame Mace. Well, he's now been purified, is allowed to come into the Machanel Avia. Below Tame Mace Bavad, not only the Tame Mace, El Afilu Mace Atzmo, even the dead body itself can come into the Machanel Avia. As it says, Vayikach Moshe as Atzmos Yosef Imo, my Imo. What does it mean? Moshe took the bones of Joseph with him. Imo b'mechitzaso. So we see from here, Moshe would keep these bones with him in the camp of the Levites. So we see from here that you can't say from the pasuk that on the seventh day he's not allowed to come into the Machaneh Leviah until he has Erev Shemesh, because at that point on the seventh day he's Tamei Mace, and Tamei Mace is allowed to go into Machaneh Leviah. So therefore, we have to say that the pasuk is talking about that somebody who brings his karbanos. It's just telling us that he has to bring his karbanos, and you can't say that yesterday he couldn't come there because you know that you're allowed to go there. Ella, so therefore, Abaye says Tvul Yom Shel Zav Kizav Dami. Keeping the mechutzer kapara lo ayil. So Abaye is saying that the Tvul Yom of the Zav is going to be considered like the Zav. The Zav who immersed in the mikvah, he's going to have the same halacha as the Zav, and so therefore Tvul Yom Shel Zav Lav Kizav Dami. And so therefore he is not like the Zav. Once he's immersed in the mikvah, he can go. He doesn't have to wait till nightfall to go to the Machaneh Leviah. But nevertheless, even the mechutzer kapara lo ayil. But since he needs to bring the carbon, so therefore he's not. So what's the reason why the zav cannot go into the Machaneh Leviah, even though he's like the zav? But since he needs to bring the carbon, so therefore since he hasn't brought the carbon, he cannot go into the Machaneh Leviah. And so therefore, the Bryce is talking about the zav who cannot go into the Machaneh Leviah is the one who has had 3 re'iyos. And so therefore, the Gemara is going to go on and darshan this Bryce. We'll finish this piece in tomorrow's daf. We'll stop here. Everybody should have a good day. Yeshikoyach.